Hey, I'm Matt Geiger. My goal is to tell the full story, not the liberal story or the conservative story, and that's why I'm giving a moderate's take on the issues. In this video, I'll take a look at how our housing and homeless policies work today. The vast majority of money for housing and homelessness originates from the federal level, from the Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD. They devise broad programs and send money to the states or local housing authorities. I'm going to break these down into categories like subsidized housing, grants to produce more housing, and FHA or Federal Housing Authority. The most funding by far is for Section 8 housing vouchers, which we spent $30.7 billion on nationally in 2016. Under that program, renters pay 30% of their income towards rent, and then the government subsidizes the rest of the rent up to the going market rate. Now, we're talking about renting from a private landlord here, so the funding is divvied up among the states, and then actual implementation of this program happens at the state or local housing authority level. Now, there's usually a crazy wait list to get housing vouchers, and the majority of people can't even get on the wait list to begin with. People often wait years to get Section 8 vouchers. About 1 in 4 people eligible for housing vouchers actually end up getting them. The next category of funding includes grants for developing low-income housing. HUD spent $6.3 billion on community development block grants in 2016. These are grants to state and local governments meant to reduce slums, provide housing, invest in the community, or enhance health and safety. So basically, in a nutshell, it covers almost anything, which gives state housing authorities a lot of the power. They typically give the money to nonprofits or businesses to build low-income or mixed-income housing, though. And I'm going to throw the low-income housing tax credit into the category of grants for developers, because in theory, that's basically what it is. The IRS allocates a certain amount of tax credits to each state. The state housing authority, in my case the Illinois Housing Development Authority, then doles out these credits to developers who build properties that will be rented to low-income individuals. And actually, what they typically do is they sell their tax credits to a third party anyways to fund the project in advance. So it basically just functions like a grant. The cost for low-income housing tax credits was about $8 billion in 2016. Then there are a bunch of smaller grants that are funded through HUD. The Public Housing Capital Fund makes up the largest chunk of this public and Indian housing amount of $3 billion. That's a state grant for capital and management activities of public housing, meaning properties that are owned and operated by the government. In my case, the Chicago Housing Authority itself houses more than 20,000 low-income houses in public housing. The Home Investment Partnership Program is a grant to states or communities for buying, building, direct rent assistance, basically anything housing related. This homeless grant assistance for $2 billion in 2016 was mainly from the McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act and is funding for state grants for homeless shelters. The Federal Housing Authority is a massive piece of the affordable housing puzzle too, but it doesn't look like it here because it's self-funding. In 2016, it actually made HUD $19 billion. When you buy a home and you're required to buy mortgage insurance, ultimately the monthly payments are passed on to the FHA, and in turn, the FHA guarantees home loans for low-income individuals. If a person doesn't pay one of these loans, the FHA will pay the bank. And that way, banks are more willing to make loans that they normally wouldn't touch. This has been credited with allowing lots of low and middle income Americans to be homeowners that normally wouldn't. We have a variety of different programs, but the solutions we've come up with don't nearly go far enough. Section 8 vouchers and low-income housing constantly have years-long wait lists, and in the meantime, people pay 60, 70, even 80% of their earnings towards rent, or they live on the street waiting until their number is called up for a housing voucher. HUD has given us a variety of random programs with no clear strategy to reach 100% reasonable housing. I just ask, why don't we ever evaluate these programs to see what works? This lack of self-review creates what we have now. A mess of random programs with no clear direction and no short or long-term solution to fixing our housing problem. Thanks for watching.